What's the status of Pacers free agency now? What do they need to do next? And most importantly, how do their biggest line item decisions they have to make change without Myles Turner? We'll do that and also look ahead at 2026 based on what the Pacers have done, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today I have survived my 100-hour speed run of Las Vegas. I am back home. The Pacers play their third game tonight against the Bulls, their currently only scheduled game, and it's a non-playoff opponent from last year in Vegas, and we are going to kind of put a bow on free agency, kind of not. It's a really slowed down time for the Pacers, right? After the Isaiah Jackson move late last week, they really only have one kind of outstanding line item, which we'll get to in terms of actually signing a player to their current team. They obviously have lots of stuff to still make decisions on, and we'll run through some of that stuff in the first segment because I talked about a lot of it in the offseason previews, but I haven't gotten back to them since Myles Turner left. And he does have, that's a big salary slot gone that does have a changing impact on a lot of those decisions and how I think the Pacers could or should be thinking about them. And then at the end, we're going to look ahead at 2026 a little bit, given what the Pacers have done and what it could suggest about their future. Again, nothing is final about their team, right? They still have not a lot, but they still have stuff to do. And anything I am saying today, I keep getting comments about this that are driving me crazy. I'm not saying that this is what I think. If I insert my own opinion, I'll say this is what I think. This is just stuff that they probably have to consider or think about because it's their job as a front office. Okay, so I talked a lot about things like a Ben Mathurin extension, an Aaron Nesmith extension, all sorts of other stuff leading into free agency. And then I haven't talked about it since Turner left. And that actually obviously changes the Pacers' short-term outlook, but it's also like a 28, 27, whatever $1 million player off their books for future seasons, which does have a long-term cap impact on their team. And we'll talk more about 2026 in the third segment today. But I want to kind of run through how that changes some of the stuff that could happen, because there's some little things that were just no-brainers. Doesn't matter what Turner does, they'll still happen, right? Ben Shepherd and Jarris Walker, they have team options for 26, 27 because of their rookie scale deals. Those are still getting picked up, right? They're good players. They're already worth what their contracts should be for that year. Basically now they're obviously going to get better, and the hope would be maybe in some cases significantly better. Like there's not really anything with those, but there is, to me, the two big ones. The extensions of possibilities for Bennedict, Mathurin, and Aaron Nesmith do have a kind of a changed outlook, right? And I've made my case that on both of those a little bit, but let's run through them now, because the original thing I talked about with Mathurin is it might not be worth it for the Pacers to extend him. Again, to be clear, I know that some people get annoyed by me saying this a lot, but a lot of people comment are like, you're not thinking of him and his growth. Put that to the side. This is just about the salary cap, right? I thought an extension for him would be challenging because if Turner takes them over the tax and then Mathurin's salary also gets a big jump the following year, they'd be a really expensive team. See, Mathurin is the only player of rotation significance coming off the books after this season, which again, we'll get to in the third segment. So if they had Turner with a small raise and then Mathurin with a big raise, they'd be really expensive, right? And we even heard Kevin Pritchard say, he thinks the second apron, as every team does, as we've seen by transaction, is pretty prohibitive. You don't want to be there. They would have been close to and or at it, at what it would be next year if they would have had both of those guys on what I would consider reasonable contracts. So I find it kind of hard to estimate Ben Mathurin, but like at 220, 222, we don't know what the second apron will be next year, but they're already at 181 million of guaranteed salaries next year. Add in 40 something, 50 something for Turner and Mathurin, and you're over it, right? And so with Turner, I thought there's just little way to me that a Mathurin extension is going to happen unless it's very team friendly. Now it's at least possible to me that they would talk about it in a way that's like, yeah, the Pacers actually have the wiggle room to do this and still, not be bound by aprons, and they could still dance around the tax if they feel like that's important to them, and they could lock up a player long-term if they think he'll be valuable. I still think the challenge of an extension, again, not my opinion of Ben Mathurin as a player. I think he's good and is more important next year than he was last year, given their new situation. I still think an extension is challenging because what he thinks he can be, and especially if he's a starter for a full season, is probably a higher level of player and more highly paid player than what his performances have shown, mostly because of the role he's been given so far. And I think that's fair. I think a lot of players on rookie scale deals think that. But I think it's now at least a possibility that the Pacers and Mathurin will explore one, although it is tricky that he's going into a season where his role, might be different than what it would be again in 2 years if Haliburton returns. So it still seems tricky to me from a team and player synergy perspective that they would know exactly what his value is. Like, I have trouble coming up with the perfect contract comp from prior restricted free agents, or at least even guys getting signed this summer, right? Free agency's been pretty slow for those restricted guys so far, but it's like possible that if they find a number they like in the, whatever it would take, high teens, 20s, 30, whatever that is, I wouldn't think it'd be that high, but it's possible that if they find the number they agree on, that they could do it now, right? And Mathurin also would be much harder to trade if that happens. That's another reason that potentially the Pacers wouldn't want to do it unless the number is very team friendly. And if you're Mathurin, you'd like to go prove it in a bigger role. So there's a lot of reasons I still think it's probably unlikely, and I would say fairly unlikely, but I would have put the chances close to zero before Myles Turner left. And now I'd put them at least a little bit higher, maybe 10, 15% if the negotiations can go away the Pacers find, and they actually have room to do it, right? As it stands next year, right as of now, things will obviously change. Players will sign, players will be traded at some point, I presume. I'm not projecting that's going to happen. That's how every team has made transactions for all time. The Pacers at $181 million of guaranteed salaries heading into next year with a luxury tax of $200. Like, they have $20 million of wiggle room under the tax. Can they get Mathurin on that and still be under? Probably. They might have to shed a little bit of salary elsewhere, but that's reasonable. So Mathurin's chances of extension, I think, went up after the Turner departure. And Nesmith's interesting too. He's the other guy who's extension eligible. People keep asking, like, why hasn't this been talked about more? Well, technically it can't legally happen until October 1st. So that's part of this. It's like, let's let 2.5 months go by before this becomes a much bigger discussion. It's just because of the date he signed his last contract. So I've also said that if I were advising Aaron Nesmith, I would tell him not to take even what his max extension would be. And then something happened beyond Myles Turner, and that's that Herb Jones signed a 3-year, $69 million contract. And I think that's a bad contract for Herb Jones. I think he's worth more than that. But that's right, basically in the range of what Nesmith's max extension is. I have it as 3 years, $63 million. However, the league average salary could change between now and the time it starts and change that ever so slightly. Again, I think Aaron Nesmith's probably more valuable than a $20 million player, ever so slightly. But that Herb Jones number made me go, maybe not. And if he's not more than that, maybe now is the right time for him to take it, because who knows what the perception of anyone on the Pacers, particularly more play finisher types, will be a year from now without Tyrese Haliburton. And then Nesmith's kind of putting all of his eggs in one basket on a contract year or a bounce back, whatever you want to say. It might make more sense for him to take it than I thought because of Herb Jones. That's not actually Myles Turner related, because the dynamics of Nesmith are the same in that his max offer is the same. And his extension wouldn't kick in for 2 years. It wouldn't kick in until 2027, 28. By then, he will be a free agent unless he extends. McConnell's partially guaranteed. Jarris Walker could be a free agent. Shepherd could be a free agent. And at that time, Isaiah Jackson going into contract year, Toppin, Nembhard, Pascal, Siakam, like, a lot will have moved in a way that's harder to project their salary. A lot of players will be more movable, potentially more valuable. Jay Huff team option, Johnny Furphy team option. You just don't it's easier for me to project next year with Mathurin starting than 2 years from now Nesmith starting. And obviously all that stuff could happen, trades, options decline, whatever, for Mathurin a year from now. But it's harder to project with Nesmith the cap impact of Turner's departure. As of right now, just on my tracking of it, their guaranteed salaries in 2 seasons is just under $150 million and a tax of $228. Like, that's a lot of float. So there's not a ton of impact there, but if they need new deal for Nesmith, new deal for Mathurin, new deal for Walker, new deal for Shepherd, that eats up a lot of that. So I think that the Nesmith extension likelihood maybe went up a tiny bit because of no salary on the books for Turner 2 years from now. I think his extension likelihood in my brain went up after Herb Jones's deal, even though I still would probably be telling Nesmith not to take it if I were his agent. And then Mathurin, I think his extension likelihood probably went up, but probably not to like a significant percentage, probably from like close to 0 to 10, 15. I don't know. I'm kind of making these numbers up, but that's just kind of what I think about it. So every other item of significance, Tony Bradley's non-guarantee, that's just a 1-year thing. Nothing really changes there. I already mentioned the rookie scale team options. The two-way guy scenarios, I don't think really changes, especially because they already have Bradley. Like, they really need an extra center. Because of that, no, they have 4 right now. Maybe you could say they're a little bit more in need of Freeman because they had lots of centers on opening night last year and they still needed Freeman. Regardless, I think the biggest line items, those 2 extensions, have ever so slightly been impacted in a way that I think makes them make even more sense for the Pacers than they did before the offseason started. Let's keep going here. What do the Pacers still need to do this offseason? They do have 15 players, but there's still more to it than that. Let's keep going. 2 weeks into free agency, what's next for the Pacers? Before we talk about any of that, let's talk about Hungryroot. And be honest, meal planning and grocery shopping can be overwhelming between busy schedules, picky eaters, and trying to eat healthy. It's a lot. That's why I love Hungryroot. They take the stress out of planning by filling your cart for you with personalized groceries and meal options based on what you like and need. Hungryroot uses their smart cart technology to recommend groceries, recipes, and even supplements tailored to your preferences. Whether you're dairy-free, gluten-free, focused on gut health, or just trying to eat better, Hungryroot has got you covered. You can take a quiz and figure out recommended meals straight from them that you would actually want if you're super busy. Why waste time at the grocery store and stress? They've got it figured out for you. It's a huge help in sticking to your nutrition goals. So take advantage of the exclusive offer we've got here. For a limited time, you get 40% off your first box. That's a lot. Plus a free item in every single box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA at checkout for that offer. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, not a lot of transactional movement of late in the NBA, but Locked On Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson has officially done the renegotiation and extension that got reported on the first day of free agency. Cole Anthony bought out. He's going to the Bucks. That's a good spot for him, I think. Cole Anthony's going to be interesting this season. I think he's kind of good. He's really tenacious for the ball. You don't care about my Bucks thoughts. Let's keep going on the Pacers and their free agency. What do they still need to do this offseason, right? Isaiah, I have to do a reminder first, but before the reminder, Isaiah Jackson has them at 15 players on standard contracts. That is, in theory, a full roster. That is 15 players. In theory, their 15 players make sense positionally and contractually, and that's all great. And they have 3 new guys and 3 guys gone, and that is what it is. And they have 2 two-way guys, and that's going to be a heavy discussion coming up in a second. In the regular season, once the season starts, you can carry 15 guys and 3 two-ways. But in the offseason, you can carry 21 players, technically of any variety. You could carry 21 standard players. If you wanted, you just have to cut it down to 15 by opening night. I bring that up to say, yes, in theory, the Isaiah Jackson signing signals like they've got a team. That does not mean they're done, right? They could still sign a point guard tomorrow. They could convert a two-way up or down. They could sign another guy. They could do all sorts of things. They could make a 1-for-2 trade and then have to cut somebody. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that they can still do. So I would not call anything final. Of course, they're going to do the Exhibit 10 dance in a couple months, and everybody's going to get all confused because those are hard to explain every single year. But keep that in mind. Like, yes, it seems final-ish because their team makes sense, and like the decisions they've made, especially after Turner left, like makes it look like a roster that is put together, but they could still totally do stuff, and in theory will do a couple more things. I would say the biggest thing still standing out there is what I've called two-way alignment, right? That doesn't mean, in theory, that does mean filling their last two-way spot, right? Right now, Ray J. Dennis and Quentin Jackson are under contract with two-way deals. That's fine, especially in a season without Haliburton. They currently only have 2 point guards on the roster. My theory is potentially they could use Quentin Jackson as point guard 3, even on a two-way, and then just have him be active and playing in games where one of McConnell or Nembhard is out. And in those games, he'd be in the rotation. Presumably, he'd be the backup point guard. He filled in well enough in rotation opportunities last year. Ray J. Dennis in Summer League has shown the best of what he can do and the worst of what he can do. You know, he could be the fourth guy in a pinch. I'd still make the case that perhaps they want to bring somebody else in, but Cam Jones is sitting there if they have like desperate to throw somebody on the floor, and they're gonna, they have to try to get him time. He's on a standard deal this year, although I expect some boom time for Cam Jones, just given the history of what the Pacers have done with their early second rounders in years that they've been at least trying to win. So perhaps their two-way situation is just using Summer League and the rest of the offseason to decide on what to do with Taylor Peter and what to do with Enrique Freeman. And Peter's had a nice summer league, and Freeman's had one game that I was like, yeah, and one game that I was like, okay, there it is. And they definitely have an idea of what Freeman is, and maybe they need another center. There's just more to it than just those two guys. Maybe it is just that. Maybe it's just who do they like better between those two in the short and long term. That with Talon Peters' rights, like they in theory could just give him a G League deal and then stash him down there, let him develop in that way, promote him if he's NBA quality, and have Freeman on the team. That has happened before. That's unusual, but there have been, like Isaiah Hartenstein, the best player who's had it happen. I ran through this already before with Peter. Mojave King had it happen with the Pacers. Like, it's not unheard of for a player to get drafted and then not sign an NBA deal, but it's pretty rare. And Talon Peters actually playing well in Summer League, right? The last game he played was quite good. So we'll see what happens there, but that's the biggest thing left is how the two ways kind of bleed into the rest of the team, because I did this when Cam Jones and Quentin Jackson signed, but I feel like there's kind of this connection in my brain with their roster spots between the centers and the point guards, right? Where they have 4 centers right now, and now that Isaiah Jackson's back, that's confirmed, right? I was kind of estimating this back at the time. They have 4 centers right now, and clearly they believe in their Achilles rehab program. They should. Every team should believe in their rehab programs, but they gave Isaiah Jackson they gave James Wiseman more guaranteed money than last year, and they signed Isaiah Jackson to a 3-year, $21 million deal. That's fully guaranteed. By the way, that is descending. We'll talk more about what that means in the third segment, but it starts at the highest value it can, which makes sense. They have the space to do that now. They should do that. So with 2 centers coming off of Achilles tears, and again, maybe they totally believe they'll be fine, ready to go. I talked to Isaiah Jackson. I think I said that on yesterday's show, but for those who don't listen on weekends and didn't listen because they lost in a summer league game, I talked to him at Pacers Thunder. He said he's at like 80 to 90% health, and he should be ready to go by camp. So like if they believe in their Achilles program, maybe they're just fine with it. But I wonder if they're going to keep 4 centers because there are 2 of them coming off Achilles. Can they play back-to-back? Can they play heavy minutes? Are they even 100% like compared to where they used to be to start the season? So maybe they keep 4 centers, but I keep wondering if they'll cut a center or move on from a center and then promote Quentin Jackson off a 2-way and then give both Peter and Freeman 2-ways. And then Freeman's kind of that 4th big anyway, if they feel like they still need 4 bigs. That does make good sense, but the obvious guy to look at in that kind of string of made-up Tony transactions that at least would make good sense to me is Tony Bradley, who is fully non-guaranteed. And I ran through this all before the offseason and talked about his team option, and I just forgot his contract was non-guaranteed. So right now he's on the roster at $2.9 million. That's above his minimum, right? Him and his agent aren't stupid. Like, they know the situation at hand. Yeah, he could make the team. He could play well in camp and be on the roster. He played fine for the Pacers last year. But I'd imagine even if he plays well, they would waive him and then bring him back on a cheaper minimum deal. But regardless, like, I would imagine, given the guaranteed money that they gave Wiseman and that they traded for Jay Huff, and certainly the guarantees they gave Jackson, that Tony Bradley is the 4th center, and his contract is completely non-guaranteed. They don't have to waive him now to open a roster spot. That's why I opened this segment the way I did. They could still do a lot of that stuff I talked about, give Quentin Jackson a standard contract, sign both Peter and Freeman, and keep Bradley for now and kind of figure it out in camp, right? That's a totally fine way to go about things if they want to kind of push back that decision. And then it's really obvious what the competition is and who's competing for what. But Tony Bradley is the guy worth looking at. If you agree with me that's a consideration for the team between the centers and point guards. I don't know that the team agrees with me, but that's what I think I'd be thinking about as the Pacers. And that's, who do they actually want on the team? Who do they not? That's why Summer League is still so interesting for them. Some of the balls in the air about actual roster spots are still floating around. And Tony Bradley's kind of at the center of it. To me, because he is the guy on the, non-guaranteed actual standard contract. Wiseman's deal isn't fully guaranteed, but I think they view him higher than Bradley, and they gave him $1 million guaranteed. So the actions of the Pacers suggest that they'd have him higher. And so that kind of leads me to believe that the ball juggling of final spots would be Q Jackson, Tony Bradley, Freeman, and Peter for some combination of 2 or 3 contracts, and figuring out how all those seats on the bus should be assigned and how everybody should be figured out from a roster perspective. But they could obviously add another point guard if they wanted to that's outside the organization. They could obviously do any number of things. That's just kind of what I view as their kind of last internal steps to figure out 2-way alignment, roster building, things of that nature. Okay, let's look ahead now. They're kind of, if 2-way alignment, as I just said, is all they have left, then they're close to done. And they might be done what does next year look like? How does this set up next season? I talked about this a little bit in the Mathurin stuff, but no Turner. What is the Pacers' outlook from a free agency and team building perspective? Because next year, Tyrese Haliburton should be back. How is that going to look? We'll get to that to close out today's Locked On Pacers. But before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel. Summer sports, they're in full swing, and whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the games. Why not make them a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the action while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Many people using FanDuel to track their favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions. Fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast payouts. It makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you are placing a same-game parlay or watching it right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, great, because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Who's been fun in Summer League? Carter Bryant with the Spurs has been a blast. To me, I didn't get a chance to watch many of the games today because I was traveling, and both of my flights got delayed. And for the first time in my life, I had to sprint through an airport. AJ Johnson on the Wizards is sprinting. He's fast. He looks good. And that from that Kuzma trade, Locked On Wizards. If you want to hear about 10 million actual NBA players on a Summer League team, the Wizards are your team. Okay. Let's finish this up by looking ahead at 2026 free agency. That's a year from now. This is probably a shorter topic for now because this is all very preliminary, right? Law Murray works for The Athletic. He covers the Clippers. He does this activity every summer, and it's always so jarring to me. And I'm bringing this up before I talk about this. What he does is he lists out every roster in the league and then says who is still on your team from 5 years ago. That's not long at all. The longest a contract can be in the NBA is 5 years. The Pacers have one guy now with Turner gone. It's TJ McConnell. And the point of the exercise is that teams change so fast, right? And so teams do project. Here's what they want to do from a cap perspective. They want to have open space here. They want to be wiggle room, flexibility here. They want to be able to get this guy at this time. Right? They have to do that. But at the same time, keep in mind, like right now I can tell you, okay, they have this many guaranteed contracts and this much space. And that matters. It matters to the Pacers planning. They made deliberate moves with these numbers in mind. But also keep in mind that teams flip like that, like opportunities come, trades happen. You just never know. And I think it's very important to kind of keep that in mind when running through, even as I do it all the time, future projections. Like 5 years from now, it'll be 2030. How many of the current 15 Pacers players do you think will still be on the team, right? No one is under contract for 29-30 right now for the Pacers. Obviously, some guys could be with extensions. Just that's an exercise for another day. Okay, 2026. As it stands, this continuity team that had continuity last year, and their three new players this year are Cam Jones, Jay Huff, and James Wiseman, who's only a new player, sort of. You know, they still have continuity again this year. Well, they already, right now, as you listen to this, have 11 guaranteed contracts for next season. 2026-27, Haliburton, Siakam, Nembhard, Toppin, Nesmith, McConnell, Jackson, Huff, Furphy, and then almost certainly Shepherd and Walker have guaranteed deals for next season. The only four free agents they could have, and that doesn't even mean they will be free agents, are Ben Mathurin, who could get extended, Tony Bradley, who is probably going to be a free agent. He can't be extended. James Wiseman, who also has a team option and could not be a free agent, and Cam Jones, who's half guaranteed. And so almost certainly will also be at least under that contract, right? And on the Pacers, potentially. So they could have more than 11 players, but they have 11 contracts guaranteed right now. And then four that are, of the four free agents, two of them are half guaranteed or have an option. So it's possible that they have a lot of continuity again next year, which is relevant because as of now, they have about $181 million in committed salaries for next summer, assuming they pick up the options that I have laid out. I think it'd be silly for them not to. And so that is already over the salary cap, which is very important for people to realize. I've seen a lot of like, that's okay. They can replace this guy next year. They can use cap next year. No, they cannot. For them to get under the cap and by a meaningful enough amount to actually do it, they'd have to trade away a player making like $40 million or more, that's just Siakam and Haliburton. What's the point of trading them away to get cap space? It's stupid. They're not going to be a cap space team next year either, which means they're limited to, again, next summer, just using the MLE. Like this year, they have access to that, although they're almost certainly not going to use it unless they clear money in another move. Or other little exceptions, right? The BAE, all sorts of stuff. Keep that in mind, in that next year will probably be about internal guys, potentially. Mathurin's one of the only guys they'll be able to sign for more than the mid-level with his full bird rights. They'll have Tony Bradley's early bird, I guess. They'll have full bird rights on Quentin Jackson, which is hilarious. So there's lots of stuff that they could do to like pay a player more than $15 million. But next year's non-tax mid-level is $15 million. And the Pacers gap from that $181 million they have in committed salary to next year's tax of $200 million is $19 million. If they use all of the MLE, they're going to blow by the tax if they re-sign Mathurin or keep any of those guys. So keep that in mind. They do have flexibility next year. They have float under the closest spending barrier, but not a lot if they want to keep their team together. And if they want to do something dramatic, they have to be very cautious on how they spend and do things. Everyone's going to throw around the word sign and trade. Those are very challenging and complicated in the new current spending alignment in the NBA. I don't necessarily think that's a CBA thing, but it kind of is. So there's just a lot to keep in mind for next year with the Pacers, in that it sounds so tempting to say, great, they can add players next year. It's going to be just as hard. That's why looking at the trade market now, this offseason, was somewhat interesting to me, and might still be as the offseason progresses, although, they're 2 weeks into free agency. Stuff isn't over, but slows down generally by this point. And then throughout the season, it'll be worth monitoring. If anything becomes available that could help the Pacers for 2 years from now, because their actual ability to add talent is not going to be, it's going to look a lot like this year, right? Their resources look a lot like this year, just without a Myles Turner full bird right situation hanging over it all as an option for them to do things. I mentioned Isaiah Jackson earlier. This is sort of a current year thing, because his second season of the contract, if it was ascending or descending, which we're talking about next year right now, would have been the same. He is descending this year, like I said earlier. So that means the Pacers' current, for my numbers, tax space is about $6.1 million. Could fluctuate if they do something with Tony Bradley. That's less than half of the non-tax mid-level. And there's no reason for them to go over the tax this season now. I mean, they obviously to build the best team possible, yes, but clearly that shouldn't be their priority with Haliburton out. So keep that in mind. They don't have the room to use their non-tax this year. If they use it next year, it might be hard to keep Mathurin without blowing past the tax. Their spending is very interesting, and people will wonder about how it got to this point. Well, because the whole premise of their team was deep, right? Their depth was such a superpower, and they have a ton of fairly paid players. I don't think they have any bad contracts on their team, but to have a lot of good contracts and a lot of good players, you have to have a lot of committed salary. And that's how you get in these situations where your resources to add talent while still staying within some potential spending constraints is kind of challenging, especially as we learned earlier this offseason that the salary cap for next year isn't projected to grow as much as many people prognosticated for a long time. Anyway, keep that in mind throughout the season. That smaller salary cap growth next year means it might be a little harder for the Pacers to add talent via signings, and trade additions might be more appealing to them over the next 12 months, which is why, again, I said maybe they should try to get a Turner trade exception from Milwaukee, but it takes two to tango. It does not sound like Milwaukee was interested in such a thing, as evidenced by their transactions. Okay, end of this. Until the Pacers make a move, I will not just rip through my own free agency thoughts anymore, because I've done them for 2 weeks now. So we'll do a guest later this week between the next two Summer League games to help talk about the offseason, where the Pacers need to go next. We will talk about, of course, the two Summer League games, and we'll figure out the other day, maybe some rotation stuff, maybe some what else they could still need or do stuff, all sorts of interesting things. And I'm open to topic ideas now that free agency has gone deep in, and WNBA All-Stars coming up. So lots of fun stuff. Lots of fun stuff on every horizon. Thank you guys so much for listening today. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers on Instagram and Twitter. Back tomorrow talking Pacers Bulls Summer League action. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.